A portion of this video was sponsored by NordVPN. I thought I'd run out of space to put new aquariums, until I imagined something huge across the whole windowsill. But big ideas can come with big mistakes, and building this tank wasn't exactly easy. Oh my god, I think it worked. Lots of things went wrong along the way, so the ecosystem had to do its best to remain stable. It did a very good job, but it wasn't without its fair share of little surprises. I've made a hobby out of breathing new life into cheap aquariums I found online. But take it from me, something this long is just incredibly hard to come by for cheap. So I ended up paying 50 quid for this 6-foot tank, which is an absolute bargain, because normally you'd be paying at least 10 times that. But if it was the most I'd ever spent on a tank, then why am I scraping off all the silicone? Well, for one thing, it needed thoroughly cleaning. But mainly the windowsill is just so shallow that I needed to resize the glass for it to fit. So after a lot of scraping, I used some dental floss to open up the seams. Taking it apart was the easy bit, but resizing the pieces was actually pretty scary, because there's no room for error and it's very easy to end up with broken glass. I wouldn't want to have to buy a new pane that costs more than the tank itself. The glass was so thick, I had to tap it to open a crack along the score line. Then with a bit of luck and some questionable brute force, success. For now. The newly cut pieces only needed 24 hours for the silicone to bond them together, and I was really happy to be done with all the construction stuff. Of course, I didn't see the Catastrophe waiting just around the corner, so naturally I moved on to the Aquascaping, for which the first ingredient was garden soil, and the second was water. The food chain starts with a thick layer of mud on the bottom, which is full of nutrients that will support the plants and microfauna. On top is a layer of sand to keep everything in place, but lots of sand will harbour enough beneficial bacteria to break down waste from the inhabitants. When I was thinking about the layout, I thought it'd be a good idea to avoid bulky hardscape, like rocks or big leaves that would obstruct my view out of the window. And for the same reason, I made sure to use a heater and a wave maker that could both fit snugly at the side. Long, spindly pieces of wood could keep a low profile, so I snapped some long branches off another piece to create this kind of explosion of roots. To prevent the wood from floating in the water, I buried stone made from petrified wood, so it had a similar texture and it could blend in while it weighed everything down. None of these materials are very porous though, so I had to use some cotton wool to help cement my carefully constructed landscape. Its higher surface area helps the superglue bond, and you can actually see the heat reaction in real time. I was quite happy with my two sprawling focal points, and it seemed for a moment like I'd actually laid a good foundation. But that's where everything went wrong. It was time to fill the tank with water, and I made the effort to gather a long list of plants from different sources to make sure there was a really nice variety. With some tied to the wood and lots planted in the sand, I was excited to have done all the work so I could sit back and watch everything develop. Unfortunately, my excitement for the ecosystem caused me to be a little careless with the tank itself, because while wiping away the air bubbles, I spotted a tiny little problem peeking its head above the substrate. Disaster had struck. Yes, that's a crack in the glass. I drained all the water immediately out of the window in a bit of a rush, and then everything else had to come out as well. When I filled the tank originally, I used a hosepipe to save time, but I didn't notice when the temperature fluctuated too quickly, and the stress was just too much for the glass to handle, so I was very lucky that only this much water escaped. The cracked panel couldn't be salvaged, so I performed some careful surgery with a hammer. Then I had to send an embarrassing and expensive email. When the new glass arrived, the tank had to be rebuilt again. So I filled this one up slowly and carefully. This time, everything was ready to grow into something that supports life. But the plants were far from established, so I was confused to see evidence of another life form. There were these strange patterns like crop circles in the sand. But I watched for a while until I eventually saw something moving. It looked like there was some kind of alien from outer space, feeling around the tank with its creepy tentacle. I went in with tweezers to investigate, but they'd just zip under the surface in an instant. Obviously some earthworms had found their way into the garden soil, before I put it in the aquarium of course. I tried my best to rescue them from drowning, but they didn't seem to want to be bothered. With patience and perseverance, I did manage to save a few. But they're very peculiar creatures, and I have no idea how many are in there. Because whenever I took one out, there always seemed to be another in its place. In one of my other tanks, some Cory catfish laid some eggs. So soon after that, I found myself with hundreds of newborns, and they grow up in no time at all, probably because they're always pottering around looking for food. In fact, after a couple of months, they were too big to stay put, and I didn't plan on adding fish to the window tank so soon, but I've got nowhere else to put these little guys. So for now, I suppose I can let them loose, where they can mature along with this ecosystem. They spend most of their time with their heads in the sand, grazing together as a social little colony. If I add even a tiny bit of food, word gets around quickly, so it doesn't take long for every last scrap to be devoured. Over the next couple of weeks, the tank went through the early stages that most natural aquariums go through, with a beautiful thick carpet of fungus and other organics constantly blowing around in the flow. Because of the broken glass, the project was set back a few months, and now winter has arrived. The sun sets at 3 PM now, so I had to install a light if I wanted to enjoy my aquarium in the evenings. I decided the Cories should stay even though they're not very colourful. My original concept was to choose species that would have vibrant colours in the sunlight, but keeping these guys I think is part of being a responsible pet owner. I couldn't catch a lot of the worms, and neither could the baby Cories, but they'll probably drown if they're stuck underwater for more than a few weeks, and that'd be a bit of a waste. So this next part's called, If for some reason you really like worms, look away now. I decided to deploy the parents, and the moment they hit the deck, they started thrashing through the sand looking for food. They'd use their barbells to sense what's underground, and then they'd just viciously dive down for a meal. It only took them about an hour to slurp up every last worm. They were also causing trouble by occasionally breaching for air at the surface. The splashes would leave marks on the window and then run down the back where I can't dry them off. So it was time to build a lid. I found someone online who was taking apart an old greenhouse, picked up some glass for free from them, then cleaned it off and cut it to size. All I need are some plastic runners, and the pieces will sit neatly on the rim of the tank. Which is important because if they weren't a good fit, after a while there wouldn't be much water left. The same day the parents went in, I caught them being romantic. I think they were so happy to be reunited with their kids, they decided to make a load more of them. Mum carried the fertilised eggs around trying to find the best possible spot, which she's very good at. Her pelvic fins make a little cradle so she can take them in little batches to somewhere that's safe and full of oxygen. So it was no surprise at all that she left them on the wave maker, where the flow could keep them fresh. Though I didn't expect her to leave quite so many in a tank that's already overcrowded. All this commotion even uprooted my carpeting plants. But if the fish want to redecorate, then I'm not going to stop them. A dense haze has overcome the water, and detritus rolls like tumbleweed in the wind. The bloom of free-swimming bacteria feasts on the excess organic matter, even after I removed half of the residents. There's been a lot of growth already, but with so many fish producing waste, the plants haven't been able to force a balance yet. Through the fog you can see that they're trying, but I added tons of floating plants to give them a hand with soaking up the nutrients. Rabbit snails will help keep the algae to a minimum before it starts to cover every surface, because I can already see there's a subtle green tinge to the water, and I don't want to get it out of control. Like the catfish, they really appreciate the soft sand, but in contrast they remain slow and steady while they trawl up and down for food. Unlike most common aquatic snails, they only have 1 or 2 babies a month, so I won't have my view out the window obstructed by hundreds of little shells covering the glass. They have so much personality for a mollusk, and it's fascinating to watch them glide around on one foot before dragging their huge, heavy body behind. But I'll be honest, I also chose them because it's a long tank, and I wanted a long snail. They migrate all over the tank with such purpose, like they always know where they need to be, because clearly they can detect algae before it's visible to the naked eye. Two weeks on, the bacterial population was stabilising, as the system grew slowly towards balance. And then, another newcomer, perfectly adapted to take advantage of the floating debris. And with the water column so alive with microorganisms, these shrimp can thrive by anchoring themselves in the water's current. If you look closely, you can see their fans collecting the green algae before they're harvested, one by one. The water's saturated with billions of these little green shards. Could they be a symptom of the fog that cleared up, or a sign of further development to come? The algae got worse. It was even more difficult now to see into the tank, after an almost radioactive looking glow had taken hold. The bloom of bacteria was replaced by green water, because with unlimited sunlight, the free-floating phytoplankton could run rampant. Bits of leftover food were also constantly being kicked up, which definitely wasn't helping. I needed to switch the fish food I was using to reduce the excess nutrients, starting with some live Daphnia that I'd been culturing for just such an occasion. Some of them were already carrying eggs, and they reproduce quite quickly anyway, so I do wonder if they'll continue to thrive by filter feeding the green water. According to my water tests, waste produced directly by the animals is still at negligible levels, but I planted a lot more plants to make sure it stays that way. British weather saves the day, because with a cloudy few weeks and those extra plants I added, the green water went away on its own. The floating plants covered the entire surface in a beautiful, colourful ceiling, but their job was done and they were ready to be removed. I can finally see just how far the Vallisneria has spread, and on the other side I can see the result of my planting efforts when I couldn't see what I was doing. Thanks to the snails, the thick mat of algae on the back wall was peeling away and growing back less densely. But they've still got a long way to go. And then there's the matter of the hydrocotyl. The baby cories love going inside it, but it's grown so tall and wide that it blocks water circulation while catching a lot of uneaten food. Basically, it's become a big ugly mop, so I'm just completely removing it, and you can see exactly how much waste it was holding onto. The fish are about 6 months old now and starting to pack on a bit of size, so I've been baiting a handful into a net every now and then to remove. A smaller population will have less biological load on the system. With so many leaves covered in algae sludge, I'm going to manually clean off some of them to help the plants grow. Most of it will float away and get eaten, but there's another buffet on the wooden hardscape waiting to be devoured. The rich, fluffy algae and biofilms are perfect for the Otocinclus, so they're the latest addition to the food web. They look so happy while they sit and stare, or while they zoom around on a carpet of food. A little gang of cute and friendly catfish are now roaming the tank together, latching onto surfaces with their spiky little sucker mouths. Only when they stop to take a break from nibbling can you get a good look at their anatomy. The branches of driftwood were their first priority to clean, snuffling around them with their little mustaches. But sometimes they'd enjoy the pure and juicy algae tablets that I use to feed the snails. They can clean plant leaves that the snails can't, because they're so lightweight, meaning they'll never really run out of food. But that's not the only place the snails can't reach. You have to love a janitor that cleans your other janitors. Adding to the roster, we got some Amano shrimp, because there's a ridiculous amount of food stuck to the plants. Amanos will pick and pry at the edible bits that no one else can dislodge. They seem to spread out so they can always clean where it's most needed, and they definitely work hard for their food, with their delicate legs constantly tinkering away around the clock. This is unlike the fanning shrimp that lazily sit still eating floaty stuff. In a tank with so much algae diversity, each creature can have its own niche, which keeps them fed and it keeps the tank tidy. But nobody will eat this hair algae. Luckily, it completely stopped spreading after the green water went away, but it'd be virtually impossible for me to clean every leaf by hand. I do have some algae-eating fish in another tank though, and they would love to eat it. This is where the sponsor of this video, NordVPN, will help. Nord lets you browse the web as if you're in another part of the world, so you can access region-specific content like foreign Netflix and Disney+, or even get yourself better deals on things like flights and other online purchases. This algae has obviously been watching me and has figured out how to use Nord to browse algae in another tank. With one click, she can explore this whole buffet of algae that's just not available back home. Nord has all kinds of tools that you can toggle on and off to keep your browsing experience safe and private. You can choose to block ads, prevent trackers, and also scan websites for scams or malware before you click. NordVPN also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, meaning it's risk-free, and if you're not satisfied you can get a full refund. Viewers of my channel can get a massive discount on a subscription, plus 4 extra months by using my link in this video's description. Just go to nordvpn.com/tanksfornothing. Thanks to Nord for being kind enough to sponsor this video, and for enabling my fish to go on their little algae eating holiday. Six months in. The Vallisneria is spread across the whole tank. But if you look close enough, you'll spot what looks like some of the leaves moving. I can see at least 3 of them. Here, here, and here. It's really difficult to tell. Like little dragons, these freshwater pipefish snake and twist through the grass. What can I say? I'm a sucker for noodle-shaped fish. These guys are constantly observing their surroundings, as if every piece of floating debris needs to be examined. It's easy to see they're closely related to seahorses, especially when you look at the way they anchor themselves to objects. I find the most fascinating thing in any planted tank is usually the thing that's hiding in plain sight. Most of the time that's the microfauna, but in this case it's the fish that are eating the microfauna. Because they blend in so well and they're so unusual. They're very difficult to spot, but I added them because I like the idea of people finding something unexpected when they take the time to look more carefully. Also, like the snails, they're long. This guy's very particular, because if you look closely you can see him scrutinise every morsel of food that wriggles in the sunlight. He'll always go for the most lively looking one. If it's not exactly right, he's happy just to let him float on by. But I need to add this Artemia to the tank regularly, to make sure it's always available if they want a snack. The bamboo shrimp will certainly benefit from the extra protein too, though I wonder if they can even consciously tell the difference when they've caught some. I think there's room for one more fish. Well, I mean one more species of fish. Something to take advantage of the sunlight. Coming from an empty tank at the shop, they were so confused and nervous at first. You could see right through their transparent bodies because their colours were so faded. Still, they curiously explored their environment. A shot of live food straight to the wave maker will cheer up any fish. There's a good chance these have never even seen moving prey before. Now, after 5 minutes in the sun, they live up to their name, by glowing like embers from a fire. The bamboo shrimp had also found their permanent home in front of the source of the flow. It always looks like they're worshipping a god, because it provides them with all their food. The pipefish have to use their prehensile tails as anchors if they want to stay on this side of the tank where the food is. But they're also smart enough to climb up to the surface, so they can hunt without competition from the other fish. The overgrown leaves form a separate habitat in the form of a layered ceiling, with cover for any microfauna to evade the faster predators. Patience and sharp vision are needed to prowl the canopy. Since the scape is so homogeneous now, it's a good time for the first bit of trimming to bring back some shape. A little haircut in the middle should provide some open swimming space, and it reveals just how crazy the grass has gotten. The total number of fish hasn't really changed, since I'm constantly removing cories from the system, so I'm not worried about throwing off the balance by adding too many fish at once. The biological load on the tank remains the same, despite having such a diverse collection of species. With zero maintenance, the tank now stands on its own. Because after slow development, a balance has been achieved. At this point there's just feeding and population control. The ecosystem's been through a lot of different phases, like the green water nightmare that eventually flourished into a sunlit riverbed, with a busy community of different creatures. The inhabitants have matured too, with striking red bellies developing on some of the pipefish. They've begun to shoal together more often, and with any luck the males will be holding fry in their pouches soon. I still have a lot left to learn about them though, since it's a rare species that's not very well documented online. Things didn't go according to plan with the scape, because I was hoping to see more dramatic plant growth at the two focal points, but there's plenty of time for that in the future. I can take it slow and steady, because it's going to be strongest when nature shapes the system at its own pace. It's been 12 months since the tank was set up, and 5 months since the last algae outbreak. But natural aquariums are constantly evolving systems with lots of moving parts. So with this thing in the window, it'll be easy to watch it change with the seasons. Without my patrons, I'd probably have given up when the tank was cracked, so thanks to all these amazing people for funding the shiny new panel, and for their very generous support.